Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel Bilingual Mingle. My name is Tanya and today we are going to discuss top 5 common questions that people are googling about bilingualism. If you haven't done it yet, please make sure that you subscribe to my channel down below and hit the like button if you like this video. So very often we think that a bilingual person is someone who learns how to speak 2 languages from the very early ages, actually from their childhood. However, such definition for many people, including me, could be very discouraging at the same time, and it's actually a very common and general definition that you will find if you type in bilingualism or bilingual. So for a very long time, I didn't consider myself to be bilingual, and like so many other people, I felt that no matter what I do, I would never become as proficient as other bilinguals who learn how to speak 2 languages from their very early childhood. And that actually prevented me to find this balance and to find this relationship, understand the relationship between 2 languages that I speak. That's also prevented me and my husband from making a decision regarding our child's bilingual education. We always felt like we don't know enough or we don't have enough experience in order to teach our child how to speak 2 languages, and therefore I decided to do my research, and this channel is actually one of the parts of this research in which I'm trying to get into all the weeds of bilingualism. So what I found out is that I'm actually a bilingual, and what it allowed me to understand is that I definitely want it for my child, and that I definitely have this special love to both languages that I speak. Especially I started feeling this love to my native language, Russian. I started seeing it as not a default language that I speak just because I was brought up in this language, but it's a separate language system that I know that I possess and I can use whenever I want to. And it's actually a very pleasant feeling that you acquire with this knowledge. So I thought that this type of video is going to be beneficial for some of you who, like me, also at the crossroad in terms of their decision regarding their bilingualism for your children, or maybe you are wondering whether you can consider yourself to be a part of bilingual community. So if you're interested and would like to learn more, let's start. But first of all, let's try to understand a classic definition of the term bilingual. According to Oxford Dictionary, bilingual means, as a noun, a person fluent in 2 languages, and as an adjective, it means speaking 2 languages fluently. It really isn't that though as simple as it might seem from the kind of first reading of those definitions, because the word fluent can also mean different things to different people, and it varies on who you speak to or what research you're referring to as to how fluent someone can be in order to be called bilingual. We can really say the same things about a monolingual person. The person might only speak 1 language and therefore is going to consider himself or herself to be fluent in this language. However, even in this case, there are different levels of fluency that we need to consider. Sometimes the amount of education that a person has received is going to influence the amount of vocabulary they have, and therefore does it would mean for us that someone who is less educated is going to be less fluent in their native language? So the answers to all those questions, guys, there's really not included in the terms like bilingualism or like monolingualism, and they are leaving there for gray areas for us, for linguists and for all of us who are curious about those topics, so that we are able to discuss them, to debate about them, and that's what I'm doing in this video. So again, before we start, I'm sure that if you're watching this video, you're slightly interested at least in this topic. So please, in the section down below, leave your comments about what would be your answers to the questions that I'm asking, and even if they're polar opposites to what I'm talking about, I still would be interested to read them and to discuss them further with you. Question number 1. Does a person need to be able to speak, read, and write in both languages in order to be called bilingual? The answer to this question is actually no. Many people consider themselves to be bilinguals, even though they are not equally fluent in both languages, or they can only read and write in 1 language. We very often in this case confuse two terms, bilingual and biliterate. So we're already familiar with the term bilingual, which means to be fluent to a certain extent in two languages. However, the term biliterate means to be able to read and write in two languages. So as you can see, those two terms are quite different. And obviously for little kids who are raised from the early childhood with two languages, with two language systems, those two processes, they're going to happen simultaneously, right? However, for the rest of us, this is really a conscious decision that each of us has to make. It's going to be based on necessity, it's going to be based on our interests, but those are two different kind of skills that we need to acquire. It's necessary to point out that you can definitely become biliterate after you became bilingual, but you can't really become bilingual after you became biliterate. So bilingualism is really the first step in this process. And I think that from the first time that you hear it, it might sound like a restriction. However, I consider it to be more like a creative side of our language skills, that of really our language that we use as a communicative tool on our daily basis, that allows us to take certain authority over it and to really see it as something that we use to communicate, to express ourselves, and I really like it. So it's also interesting to point out that especially that in the United States, young children who are raised in bilingual families, they are very often lacking the opportunity to become fully biliterate. The reason for this is because we still have a lack of educational resources that are necessary for children, for young adults to become biliterate. And the situation that very often happens is that young children, to a certain extent, while they're preparing for their school years, they are biliterate because they are educated at home. And once they start going to school and their parents are obviously working the majority of the day, and unfortunately they can't dedicate the same amount of time to their language learning process as they could in the past, those kids start prioritizing the language of the majority over their target language or over their minority language, right? And therefore, even if they were biliterate to a certain extent, they don't really continue acquiring those necessary kind of advanced level reading and writing skills that they would need to become fully biliterate for the rest of their life, and therefore they are very often just left bilinguals. Question number 2. Do we need to speak both languages with the same fluency in order to be called bilinguals? The answer to this question is also no. Specialist in bilingualism and French professor François Grosjean mentioned in one of his articles that, I'm going to quote this, bilinguals know their languages to the level that they need them. Some bilinguals are dominant in one language, others do not know how to read and write one of their languages, others have only passive knowledge of a language, and finally a small minority have equal and perfect fluency in their languages. What is important to keep in mind is that bilinguals are very diverse, as are monolinguals. So I really like this statement a lot because of its inclusivity, and I think eventually because of the reality of bilingual world that we live in, I think that it's eventually going to actually replace a very classic definition that I cited earlier to you from Oxford Dictionary. So I like it a lot because it's inclusive, and it really allows us to avoid situations in which we're going to have monolinguals on one side of the debate, and then on another side people who perfectly speak both languages, right? So in these kind of situations we usually forget people in between, right? And I think that Professor Grosjean's definition is very inclusive. It's really great, and that's why I so support his view of bilingualism and his, and so like this definition. This definition also allows us to determine ourselves whether or not we can be called bilinguals, and therefore we could potentially, with our experience and decision, encourage other people to acquire the same mindset. Based on my personal experience of being bilingual, of studying actually in the United States. Just 4 years ago, I finished my master's in theology, and also around the same time I think in 2018 I became a SAT test prep instructor. I definitely can say that I would not be able to explain certain terms, to even to talk on a kind of more profound level about the subjects that I teach and know about in English in Russian, because again the vocabulary, the terms, the experience that I went through, it was all in English, and I don't think that it makes me any less bilingual. It just proves the point that I know my languages to a certain extent to what I need to know them, and that is really great and does not prevent me from calling myself bilingual. Next question. In order to be called bilingual, are you supposed to get rid of your accent? The answer to this question is also no, and I think out of all the questions that I decided to select for this video, this is one of my most favorite ones to talk about because on a really daily basis I experience this kind of like awkward moments regarding my accent. The accent is an indicator that we are able to speak more than one language in our daily life. However, accents are not and never should be kind of like an identification point for other people to consider that we might not be fluent in 2 or more languages that we speak. I'm a huge proponent of an accent. I never actually tried to get rid of my accent, and unfortunately accent, let's call them opponents, are very often confusing what does it mean to have an accent and what does it mean to mispronounce some words. Obviously, if we mispronounce a lot of words in our speech, it would prevent people with whom we are talking to understand us clearly, right? However, it's a very rare case when there's actually an accent that prevents people from understanding us. And if we're approaching a language knowledge from a creative side, we should remember that a presence of accent means that the language that we speak with an accent is going to, in the future, undergo certain changes in order to accommodate various accent differences, right, that people might have, and eventually that might prompt for other languages to appear. So we, by speaking with an accent, we actually starting creating history, a language history of new language history of the languages that we speak to. It would be probably interesting to bring up one of the examples of such kind of process. So for instance, such languages as Dutch, English and Swedish, 1500 years ago, they were all the dialects actually of the same language, and later on, because of how different people were kind of using them and in the way they were communicating on them, they later on diversified in 3 separate languages. In fact, I think that the idea that accent might really prevent person from communicating fluently on non-native language might come from this idea that it's widely spread idea, but unfortunately wrongfully spread idea, that bilingualism should be evaluated with the same criteria as monolingualism. This is the point that I already started touching upon in a previous question, and I think that's again brings us back to the same questions. In my opinion, bilingualism should be separated, and the way it started should be separated into a completely different field of study, and different criteria should appear in order to evaluate language fluency in bilingualism, multilingualism, and in monolingualism. And therefore, I think that if we accept and start using more often Professor Grosjean's definition of a bilingual person, I think that would be a first step in the direction of eventually solve an accent dilemma and language fluency dilemma that we currently have in the linguistics world. In fact, if we are really trying to bring up this health and positive bilingual generation, we need to stick to our accents, and we should never get rid of them, particularly for our children. Accents, they reflect our diversity, and being identifiable through the accent, it's really a wonderful thing. Unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, being a first generation American, very often when people talk with me in person or via phone for the first time, I usually experience one of the two kind of reactions to my accent. People either don't say anything, which is really great, and I don't really expect them to in the majority of cases, but in other cases, unfortunately, people find it necessary in a very awkward way to ask questions like, you know, or where are you from, right? Which is automatically diverse, kind of differentiates me, right? This kind of comment from the community I belong to for over 8 years. Or they find it necessary to comment on my language proficiency, which is also not something that I ask them to do. And I think that it should only happen in a language class by your language teacher. So if you feel like that you're one of those people who might potentially in the past made those okay comments, but they, you know, but that definitely can be made better. I would suggest to next time you encounter bilingual or multilingual person to ask something like, are you bilingual or are you multilingual? What other languages do you speak, right? So those questions are very kind of similar, but they are more general and neutral, and they would show your positive attitude towards multilingualism, and definitely would be very appreciated by the representative of this community. Next question. If I mix up languages in my speech, can I be called bilingual? That is such a popular question that I asked myself one time when I just moved to the United States. So the answer is that you absolutely can. What is actually going on in your brain is the process that is called code switching. Code switching, or we also call it borrowing, is a very common behavior for bilinguals, and they usually doing it when they are talking with other bilinguals. They are kind of mixing up, or let's say not they, but we're mixing up languages intentionally because we know that people we're talking to are part of our pack, part of our group, and therefore we know that they are going to understand this kind of code, right, that we use. Mixing up languages can happen for very wide variety of reasons, really, in bilingual brain, but the most common a reason would be is that there's some words, they just make more sense to us in one language rather than another, and therefore we tend to use those words in a different language in our speech. It's also necessary to say that the same people would not mix languages at all if they know that they are talking with a monolingual person. Of course, none of us is perfect, and sometimes there are going to be slips here and there, but in the majority of cases that would be a situation that you encounter. I personally tend to code switch when I feel very confident regarding the topic that I'm talking about, or when I'm confident in my audience. Let's say that I talk to my students that I've been working with for a while, or I'm talking with some of my close friends, or with my husband, and it seems like that I kind of, when I try to analyze my code switching process, it seems like that I code switch from Russian to English when I want to use the words that I experienced only when I started living in the States. One of the very fun examples for such code switch would be word paper towels. So I moved to the United States when I was 18, and I honestly never really used something that we understand under paper towels object here, and therefore whenever even I talk with my family or Russian friends, I say paper towels instead of saying it in Russian. And I think that it comes, this kind of a code switch comes from the idea really that we experience certain things only in one language, and therefore that prompts us to continue using those words in this language in which we experienced it for the first time. And also, one last thing I would like to point out regarding this topic is that it also proves a point that two or more languages that we speak, they are really different universes, language universes in our brain, and they are always present inside us. They are never gone, or they never disappear, and they're so interconnected that sometimes we can't really even probably say that, this is a box in my head that only responds to Russian speech, and this is a box that only responds to English, right, in my case. So that's a very interesting subject, and I hope you guys also as interested and inspired by it as I am. Next question. Does bilingual mean bicultural? I wish the answer to this question would be yes, like for other questions that were kind of the answers to which were quite positive. However, for this question, the answer would be no. Speaking a heritage language, that definitely is important part of being bicultural. However, there's much more things going on and should go on in your head and in your life in order for you to be called bicultural. So really, the immersion goes way beyond that. So in order to be called bicultural, we need to be aware of so many other things in addition to the language system. It should be, we need to have knowledge about traditional cuisine, about clothes, about jokes, celebrations, manners. And however, to learn all this, we need to be really actively engaged with the culture on a daily basis. And it's very hard to do really when you live in a country where this culture that you're trying to be aware of and practice is not a dominant culture. Very often the most successful type of people who are who can call themselves bicultural are those who grew in one particular culture until their let's say adulthood years, and then maybe later had to move abroad, but still were able to keep the knowledge of their native culture, right? However, at the same time, I automatically already practice a different culture of the country that they live in, or those are the children of bilingual families and bicultural families who are practicing living two or more cultures in their family unit on a daily basis. It's also important to know that biculturalism means that we really should be able to feel at home with two cultures, and it requires a lot of additional work and additional learning processes from the very early age. It comes from the knowledge of your roots, of your history, of your traditions. For bilingual families, in order to be able to learn all this and to teach their children all this knowledge, it's going to require a lot of hundreds of additional learning hours that unfortunately not all bilingual families have. And therefore, in order to, I truly believe really that in order to, if you decide to raise your child as bilingual and bicultural, this decision should be a very serious decision that you make, and it's not really easy to make. And therefore, in my trailer actually for this channel, I say that some people unfortunately tend to believe that if you are bilingual, then automatically your children are going to be bilingual. However, that's really a very serious decision that every family is making, and I hope at least that families do this like our family did, because if we start this process and then leave it at some point like in the middle for various reasons, that can make more harm than good, because children of such families, they start being kind of curious and not sure about their cultural identities, linguistic identities, and therefore it's going to be very hard for them to identify themselves with one or more than one communities that they belong to. And therefore, when we made this decision in my family, we definitely had to kind of explore additional educational resources that are available in our area, and we decided that apart from our son to learn Russian now and obviously in the future. We decided that he definitely is going to also attend chess classes in Russian, math classes in Russian, and eventually probably also is going to attend Russian history lessons. This is just examples and something that is available in our area in Philadelphia. And obviously, if you want to do the same, please do your research about things, educational opportunities that are available for your children in the area that you live in. Last question. Am I bilingual forever? And I believe the answer to this question is yes, and it depends. Since language is inseparable from our thought processes and our mind, I believe that each language gives us additional kind of shade to our identity and our personality. For instance, if you ask me in English what's my favorite food is, I will immediately start thinking about all of my favorite food places in Philadelphia, and examples I would come up with would be probably Philly cheesesteak or roast pork sandwich. However, if you ask me the same question in Russian, I would automatically transport myself back to Moscow, where I was born, and would probably come up with examples like a buckwheat or let's say roast chicken that my family cooked very often when I was still living together with them. So I really think that language that we learn is acquired through the experience, right? And it's acquired and assimilated in our brain through the experience. And until we have a memory of this experience, we will never forget the language that helped us to acquire it. And it's obviously very possible that in the course of time, especially if on our daily basis we start using one language more than another, or stop using one language completely, right? We can start experiencing something that is called, for instance, subtractive bilingualism, when it refers to the situation where a person learns the second language to the really detriment of the first language. So let's say if you moved moved from your native country and you started actively learning a second language, you can experience a process called subtractive bilingualism. On the opposite kind of side, if for instance, let's say you lived abroad for some time, but later then you moved back to your native country, the process that your language might undergo would be called passive bilingualism, and actually that would be the process for your second language that you learn how to speak in not in your native country. This process usually can be identified by kind of like the understanding that you continue understanding the second language. However, you can't, you realize you can't really use it to talk anymore. And that happens obviously because of the lack of practice. And therefore, I can say that yes, you can consider yourself to be bilingual forever. There's always going to be some memory of another language saved in your head. However, if we're talking about this process in a very kind of like a standard way, right? I would say that, and it's obviously based on the research that was done regarding this topic, the ability to speak certain language can be lost in the family unit after 2 generations. Again, based on my experience, I don't think that I've undergone either subtractive bilingualism or obviously passive bilingualism does not apply to me, but I can say that I notice sometimes that I'm completely blanking on some words in Russian when I'm talking with my Russian friends or family. However, that's this kind of a time when I completely forget the word. It's usually very short, and a word comes to me pretty quickly. And I think that the reason for it is because I'm using both languages on a daily basis, because I'm raising my my son in 2 languages, and Russian is a language that we use to talk to each other. Okay, and so what we can do with all this? So first of all, I hope that this video is going to prompt you to start thinking about yourself as being a part of bilingual community, because I hope that based on the answers to the questions that I provided to you, I hope that you see that majority of people actually in the world are bilinguals, and some of them actually don't know it, right? And I hope that also if you understand it and accept it, I hope it also would prompt you to start thinking about how to potentially improve your language skills, or how to better understand the relationship between languages that you already have, right, in your head. I also hope that this video would make you think about what you can do about those skills, not just for yourself, but if you have kids, for your children, because we always can do either of two things. We can either ignore it and just continue with our life, right? However, we also can really do the best we can in the situation that we are, and give ourselves and our children chance to potentially become bilinguals in the future. So thank you so much for watching this video till the very end. I hope you liked it. Please make sure to subscribe to my channel down below if you don't want to miss the next video, and I'll see you guys later. Bye!